talking Winter War, also known as PREBOJ, which is his original Slovenian name, also known as Breakthrough. So this is a low-budget Slovenian movie set in World War II, the closing kind of like, you know, few kind of like months of World War II. And it tells the story of a group of partisan resistance fighters as they are trapped on this mountain range surrounded by the Nazis. And they are massively outnumbered, they are starving, they are freezing, and it's about the struggle of the human spirit and overcoming the odds to obviously win the day, or get home, at least for those lucky ones. Actually based on a true story, relatively kind of low budget movie. So first of all, let's talk about, I think, what worked in here. I think the setting against this snowy backdrop really gives it a cold and harrowing feel, because you really do feel like these partisan soldiers are absolutely suffering. The actors do, and they actually look like they're actually freezing. I'm just going to say it. It's clearly obviously filmed on location, and these actors genuinely look like they are freezing their asses off filming this. But that translates to film, and you do think, blimey, this looks like really hard. You think, how they, despite the Nazis, how are they going to survive the elements? So you really do feel like the odds are genuinely kind of stacked against them, and you know, how are they going to get out of this? And it makes for some very beautiful cinematography in times, having this kind of like this snowy kind of snowy wilderness going on for miles, great mountain ranges, some really fantastic looking kind of scenery here, and you know, location shooting I think works well. I think for a lower budget kind of World War II film, that they do a good job here of having a large number of casts. So when we have our battles, they seem, you know, there's like a decent amount of soldiers on kind of each side, which gives it somewhat of an epic feel to a certain degree. And, you know, I have to say there's some authenticity in regards to, you know, the vehicles of the time, uniforms and things like that. And the battle scenes they're not gratuitous exactly, and they do feel like more protracted. So they're not necessarily as exciting to watch, but in a way I feel maybe it's somewhat more realistic to a certain degree. But that's a double-edged sword, because they do feel a little bit long-winded at times, and not particularly kind of all that cinematic in a lot of ways. The acting's somewhat of a mixed bag, I have to say. I always find it somewhat difficult to judge foreign films, especially when there's subtitles, because, you know, I'm not sure if I'm reading the exact words at the exact time and they're saying it and things like that. So it's sometimes hard to judge. But I will say, I think some of the actors here overacted to a certain degree. You know, there's some kind of like facial expressions that just seem to be like, right, look surprised. So it's like, you know, it's kind of like, oh, maybe dial it down just a little bit. I just think there's sometimes it's both written and acted in a kind of a way that seems over the top. So I'll give you an example. So we have our Nazi characters, and this kind of like this, you know, Nazi commander or whatever, he's commanding his own, and he just shouts, get out the truck, you dogs. And he's like, you know, he's like the bad guy. And, you know, the way he kind of talks to his men compared to how like the partisan commander sort of speaks is, as a viewer, we're meant to say they're the bad guys, they're the good guys, but it just seems over the top. And although I'm sure there were people like that, again, it just seems like very simplistic, a simplistic view, and, you know, people are kind of overreacting to a certain news. I didn't think the acting wasn't brilliant. I have to say as well, I think the movie, I mean, this is a factor of being based on a true story. You know, you kind of have to say the story that happened. But there are instances here where I just feel like there's not a lot going on. You know, we spend a lot of time with our resistance fighters, you know, round a fire, talking, eating their rations, things like that, drying their socks. And it's a lot of screen time with that. And then we have our sort of battle sequences. And as I've said, they're just not particularly cinematic in some ways. Now, sometimes you've got to think of an actor I've never served, but it seems to me that it's not going to be like, you know, the action movies. It will be, sometimes there'll be longer protracted affairs with, you know, people kind of like waiting for a shot and things like that. So there's a degree of that, but it just isn't particularly exciting. And I don't think the sound design helps either. I think some of the sound design here is a little on the weaker side. And, you know, it could have done a bit more work with the Foley artists and things. So overall, it's a little dull, to be quite honest, and not helped by a monologue which is kind of read over the whole movie, more or less, by obviously the kind of our main sort of character as he's older. And it kind of, you almost feel like you're just listening to a story, and, you know, like you have like someone's talking and someone's like reacting to what they're saying, and it doesn't really work. It's not particularly dramatic, if you ask me, not particularly exciting, but commendable for, I think, the effort that went into it. And like I've said, the one thing I would say this movie does do is really demonstrate, I think, the hardships, even outside of the actual fighting, about what people had to go through. And that, I think, is demonstrated very well because of the natural elements these actors had to film in. So for me, it's a 4 out of 10. I don't think it's particularly recommended viewing, but there are elements here that I think are interesting for those who are interested in, obviously, World War II movies. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.